You don't want to self-report and go like, hey, I told you there's skeletons in my closet. And then after that, go corrective action. Let me call KLF. Let me call the right folks. Let me get help.
So some of you may have recently watched our video on should you whistleblow. This time around, we're going to come at it from the other side. If you are a sponsor, if you are a site, if you are a CRO, if you're an IRB, should you self-report? Should you air your own dirty laundry? To talk about this, we have with us Edye Edens, and my name is Darshan Kulkarni, and we're both from the Kulkarni law firm. However, what we do tend to do is we aren't necessarily seeing the world the same way. So we're going to have Edye talk a little bit about her perspective, whether she's talking about sites, IRBs, even CRO sponsors, if you have an opinion. So Edye, should you self-report as a company?
Yeah, so the if I had to be pinned to a corner on this, right, nail jello to the wall, it depends lawyer style, I would say yes. My caveat would be, but not always. Okay. So I'm sneaking the it depends in.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is, and I would actually say this is whether you're the sponsor, the CRO, the IRB, the AMC, a small independent site, truly, whichever stakeholder you are in the industry, there is most certainly a line where self-reporting is required and it's going to be on you if you don't. And then there are situations where truly I feel like you do have a period of time to implement corrective action and may not have to end up reporting. But you need to be extremely clear on a few things. First and foremost, whatever regulation or law it is that applies to that reporting, you better know it forwards, backwards, and not just what it says, but what the recent enforcement trends are by that particular agency. How conservative are they being? How liberal are they being? How frequently are they out auditing? What are organizations and entities, whatever you are in the space, like yourself, being viewed? Essentially, what's the precedent out there? The other part is you got to understand your organization's appetite for risk. If you are an entity that could shoulder a potential finding, that could shoulder a bit of a stir around having not self-reported something, and you really do have a strong rationale for believing you should not self-report, those two things combined may lead you to not report with a lot of obviously documentation as to why you didn't. If you have a really low appetite for risk, for whatever reason it might be, and you're in that same gray space, you may, however, say, look, I think we would be better off self-reporting and letting this particular agency or entity go ahead and decide and tell us. But again, delicate line of what skeletons you want out there, and you can't put them back in the closet. What about you?
So the idea being not everything that you report is reportable, because as we discussed in another video that we did, sometimes there are ethical rules and not legal rules. So you can't report yourself on ethical rules. There's no such thing. On the other hand, let's say you think that you are legally required in some way to report. The next question to answer is, why bother reporting? What is the risk that you take on by reporting or not reporting? Got to go through that analysis for yourself. Because if your policy is required, someone's already done a lot of that legwork for you, but you need to go through that analysis as a company and go, if I don't report, will my investors get really upset? Will my will my stockholders, shareholders be upset? Would the agency that I'm applying to or relevant agency be upset with me for some reason or the other?
Make sure when you're looking at that policy that says we don't report, like who wrote that? Were they justified in writing that? Just because while you can in certain situations say, look, our SOPs say we do not report this, you agreed to that sponsor, we did not report it, and so thus we are in a situation where we followed our own policy and this was not incorrect for us to non-report. There are also scenarios where you may very well have an SOP that says we don't report this, but that was an incorrect move on your part, or that is a no longer valid statement because something is updated or changed. And so just because you have it in your own policy and procedure actually does not mean you can use it as an excuse to not report.
I will take it one step further. I would argue that if you have that written down in your policy, call us right now, because you might be exposing yourself to a ton of liability by saying, do not report something, because there are always these gray areas you're talking about. So I think you need to look at the risk. Now, one of the funny things is that up to maybe a month ago, the onus was always, okay, I report, and then what? Because the DOJ OIG may still take the position that we're going to still prosecute you. The good news is that the Trump administration just came out and they said that, you know what? Number one, we are going to de-emphasize white collar crime prosecution. However, the exception to that is healthcare fraud and health violations of the Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act. However, in addition to that, they just came out within the last couple of weeks and they said, if you self-report, we are going to take the de facto position that we're not going to prosecute you. So now it's almost the option to go, just report everything, because they're taking the de facto position of, we will not prosecute you.
Enjoying our content? We'd love to hear more. Please like, comment, share, and find more. Do you think it was intended to apply to clinical trials? Do you think that's what
Depends
they were
on what it is.
thinking of? Do you think they were thinking of things like, self-reporting patient referral payments or other things, like other scenarios like we've discussed here? Or do you think that it's a matter of this could fall underneath this, but this wasn't like the target when they made the announcement?
I think the targets were more generalities, things like
Yeah.
Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act or False Claims Act.
Right.
So your drugs must be safe and efficacious, must not be adulterated and misbranded. How do you
Right.
prove that? Using the clinical trials that we're doing. So when they said that we will not de facto prosecute, this is an opportunity for you to go, you know what? Under this rule, we're now safe. Now, we don't really know in practicality how this is going to play out because the Trump administration does seem to change its mind relatively quickly. However, it's allowed a lot of people to breathe a sigh of relief. And it may be worth going, is it better for me right now to air all of my dirty laundry and then be safe on that front because I've already done my job? I know that at the very least, the Trump administration's come out and said, this is not something we want to go after right now. Now, here's the downside of this. You do all of this self-reporting. You think that the risk is worth it. You think that you've aired your dirty laundry. You're out in the clear. You're wrong. Because that does not mean you get to go back to life as it was before. You've got to do a full revamp. You might be looking at having a monitor in there, reviewing what you're doing. You might have to have this monitor be external, blah, blah, blah. So the idea being,
if you want a successful self-report, you would ensure that you are already into the root cause analysis and corrective action as you're self-reporting. You don't want to self-report and go like, hey, I told you there's skeletons in my closet. And then after that go, corrective action, let me call KLF, let me call the right folks, let me get my help. No. Yes, the Trump administration has said, if you self-report, they're not interested in coming after you. Yes, I actually do think a lot of the clinical trials piece of this is getting just swept in and wasn't the initial target, at least. But I think if you self-reported, even in this environment, with how much the Trump administration does have concerns about corruption, whether the data aligns with that concern or not, I think that if you self-reported in a way that didn't show that you realized the gravity of the situation, that you were already working on it, that you had a root cause, some semblance of we're taking care of this, I do think they could still come after you. Well, not that they just could, because they always could, no matter what they said, and people need to understand that. But B, I think they might.
Find related podcasts below.
There's so many layers to this. And I
Yes.
think proof in the pudding here that we can talk about this for quite some time. And it's really not even about a disagreement per se. It's really more that as we peel back more layers of the onion, there's more and more perspectives and there's more and more angles to bring into the conversation. And that's where the value of having folks like ourselves in the conversation and the mix helps to bring in those perspectives, to walk through all of them before you make whatever decision is inevitably in front of you.
Speaking of, if they want to reach us, how do they reach us, Edye?
Absolutely. Please go to our website, kulkarnilawfirm.com. You can always find us on LinkedIn across many pages. And we're both available on email, Edye or Darshan at kulkarnilawfirm.com.
Call, click, or email.